Welcome, fellow surfers. I have great news for you. The first time ever, we're going to be talking about the biggest energies for the entire week. For the last week of June 24th through the 30th, we're trying something new. Normally what we do is we talk about energies, triangulating energies for a couple days, 2 to 3 days at a time. For the first time, we're going to do a whole week because we know what the astrology looks like. We did a reading. The I-Ching reading covers all 7 days. Now, the only problem is that the DreamBot, the collective mind, the collection of dreams, the dream words, those tend to change day by day, and we're going to give you smaller updates throughout the week. But we thought it'd be really just interesting to see if we could pull this off, and I think we have. I can't wait to see your comments, and if you have any suggestions or any beefs with this, please, by all means, I want critiques. I want your opinions. So we always start with a summary slide, or at least we've started that recently, and we use 2 forms of astrology. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, and I'll probably do a different video on why we have 3 different zodiacs. That's an important concept, but for now, the influence side, these are all influences. And if you're new here, these bubbles here indicate the different quote unquote technologies. One of those is looking at tropical astrology. That's the purple circle here. And you can see a list of all the highlights in astrology over the week. We've got the sun going into Cancer already there. We've got a T-square forming tonight, and including Venus, and that's important because Venus is all about relationships. And the DreamBot is the green circle that also is looking at heavily into relationships. And then the I-Ching, the reading for the full week was hexagram 13, which just happens to be relationships or fellowship with 2 change lines. But as we go along, you'll see that this relationship thing is a continuum. So it's a togetherness on the one hand, that's the DreamBot. But the DreamBot also had a second meme of disconnected. So that's also that's the same continuum. And by the way, the astrology covers all of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill down all these influences. We have a high congruency. If you interpret this as it covers it all, which the astrology does cover all the whole continuum of relationships, then it would be really high. But there is more to the astrology than just relationships, and that's pretty important. But overall, 0.75, it's directly related, and we've got ourselves a massive week of kind of yearning for relationships. This is going to feel like maybe on the one hand, some people are going to feel extremely lonely. But if you remember Sun in Cancer, it's going to feel very nurturing. We even in the DreamBot will talk about mom and baby. I mean, you can't get more nurturing than that. And so there's this nurturing need, but also, just Sun in Cancer is it could be very emotional. Emotions are very representative of relationships. And so this whole need of maybe being with someone else or going away from either a group or abandoning or, that kind of thing, the need to get away could also be represented, especially when we talk about the T-square. So this is a big report. We're going to look through all the astrology in the DreamBot. So hang on, we're going to start drilling down the influences next. And welcome to the CIRF report. If this is your first time, this might look a little bit confusing. And on the lower right-hand side, we've got all of the, we got the same summary slide down below, so you can see, you can keep referring to it as we go along here. And we go through the DreamBot, which is the collective unconscious. We go through all 7 days of the astrology with various zodiacs. And so if you haven't subscribed yet, do so right now before you forget, and select the bell so that you get notified of new surf reports. We're going to start with the DreamBot. Now, keep in mind that the DreamBot is the collection of collective dreams. It's what everyone, the most common dream words that people are recalling in dream time. And this very representative of Carl Jung's collective unconscious. It just happens to be that we are all thinking about relationships and communication. And these are the red arrows, including, like I talked about before, well, I mean, the top word is neighbor. That is very much the kind of the Mercury Gemini influence. And both of those are going to be in this report. But also mom and baby are very high on the list. That's going to be tropical Cancer, as Sun is in Cancer and recently gone there. So this is very, and then you've got some emotions in there. So this is very, very tied with the current astrology. Keep in mind that we also have the blue meme, which is more disrupted or avoided, as you've got words like void, blurred, exit, float, and floating. So it's kind of like aloof. They just kind of have that non-attachment kind of feel to it. So it is on the continuum of relationship in that you're disconnected. So that, but it is the same continuum. All right, let's go to the astrology now. And we start with Monday, 6/24, and you can see that the T-square goes exact at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Mercury square Neptune. Now these two, Neptune and Jupiter, are not exact, but it's close enough to still produce that energy. And we've got the Venus still with an opposition over to Jupiter, but that's about ready to decay. As Venus tends to go a little bit faster than some other planets around the zodiac. So the T-squares we talked about last surf report, if you really want to get into this, I highly recommend going back to look at the last surf report because we talk more at length about this. But Venus is about relationships in tropical Gemini. Tropical zodiac is our influence. So we've got this influence of heavy into relationships. However, Neptune can kind of be a little bit dreamy, and then Jupiter might be a little bit over optimistic about this. So there might be a strong yearning for relationships. Either most people are probably going to be wanting deeper relationships, or maybe feeling lonely or feeling abandoned in this case and expecting more out of their partners. So that's definitely commensurate with the DreamBot. And then you've got some minor aspects with the moon, but in a large part, we're going to skip the moon aspects unless they have something directly to do with us. And we've got moon trine Mercury in Cancer, Cancer being a heavy influence, as we talked about before. It's just the sun and Mercury being in Cancer going to produce that heavy nurturing kind of feel. Mars doesn't like necessarily being in Cancer, so that could be more contentious. Now, this is moving on to Tuesday, and we have the moon over Chiron making a conjunction at the same time making a square to the sun. And so that's kind of disharmonious in relationships. And, the sun still having that kind of leftover residue from Gemini and going into Cancer, both some totally different feel when you come into in terms of relationships. And so this square, as the moon is coming over Chiron, can kind of feel like maybe the need to heal or the need to help out other people, and but kind of probably in more of a forced way, or not like you're desired, like you want to kind of thing. But other than that, not a whole lot of aspects on Tuesday. On Wednesday, it's mostly just the moon hitting all these. We've got a square, we've got a trine, moon trine Jupiter, and then you've got a sextile over to Venus again. That one in the later afternoon. That one, sextile, that's kind of making things a little bit more harmonious than before. But you keep in mind that the moon is in Aries now. So on Wednesday, kind of feeling a little bit more isolated, a little bit more, not like lonely isolated, but more self-determined, if you will. I mean, that's the Aries way, with all these other influences as well. Let's move on to Thursday. And you're going to see kind of a display here. You've got squares with the moon squaring up to Mercury and Mars, both of those, and that's in both of these in the morning. But then later in the day, the sun's going to make an exact sextile over to Uranus. So some heavy duty change here, and seeing the ability to change. Now, get this. This is happening pretty much at the same time, within a few hours of when the moon goes over Uranus. So there's some heavy changing going on. So we start with the conjunction at 7:30. Then you've got the sun making a conjunction at noon. So all within on Thursday afternoon, it's all about seeing some highlights of some new change. And with the moon there, you're going to feel the emotional pull of this in your possession or your material side of things. As the moon heads into tropical Taurus, it's going to feel a lot more material, a lot more maybe slower, maybe bullheaded, that kind of thing, or steadfast. Okay. And then on Friday, the moon's going to make a trine over to Saturn and Pluto and make a sextile over to Neptune. And let's continue because we got a lot more to talk about. It's all the moon as well on Saturday. More sextiles and a trine over to Pluto, but those are early in the morning. And then finally, Sunday making moon going into Gemini again being very, harmonious, back into relationships again, and making an optimistic opposition over to Jupiter. And that's on Sunday night. We'll have another CIRF report out to discuss follow on. So what the time now is, we're looking for the overall context from an I-Ching perspective. We did an I-Ching reading, and the first hexagram here is 13, and it just happens to be fellowship. You can see all the yang lines here, but we do have two change lines, number 2 and number 5. I'm going to read just a little bit from the Book of Changes, because it's not just fellowship just by itself. There's some change lines, and those are going to be very important for the influence. 6 in the second place. That's this one right here. 6 in the second place means fellowship with men in the clan, humiliation. There is danger here of formation of a separate faction on the basis of personal and egotistical interests. And you can see as the moon goes into Aries at the beginning part of the week, this is where we start getting egotistical in those relationships, i.e. the sun still in Cancer, moon in Aries. And so these are connected with the astrology. This change line means that check your egotistical reasons for being with or without the relationship. And either way, you're going to be humiliated in that case if you have the wrong intentions. Instead, we want to welcome all people. You don't want to condemn one group or order in order to unite the others. So low motives will lead to time of humiliation. That's a really important one. Then the other is 9 in the 5th place. Means men bound in fellowship first weep and lament, but afterward they laugh. So again, more emotional kind of chaos, like sounds like very Gemini, and we have a lot of things in Gemini. Let's go look at some of those aspects. We still have Venus in Gemini. That's the kingpin of relationships is Venus, and Gemini being very harmonious. Moon ending up in Gemini. Right. And of course that T square is kind of confusing relationships. So let's head back to the I-Ching reading, because when we put in these change lines, we get hexagram 14. This becomes the solution. This is our transition to, all right, now we know what the influence is. It's heavy into relationships, whether it's loneliness or abandonment or anything surrounding relationships, or just missing someone, and or maybe being saturated with relationships. Anything having to do with relationships is the influence, but it's not the solution. In other words, we need to be, the I-Ching is recommending that we look somewhere else to best use this energy, this influence. And that is I-Ching 14. It says possession in great measure. Power is expressing itself in a graceful and controlled way. This brings extreme success and wealth. We've already read in I-Ching hexagram 13 that the success and the wealth isn't going to be coming from relationships, and particularly from bad intentions in those relationships. Instead, the two trigrams indicate that strength and clarity unite. It's about inside. It is done by virtue of unselfish modesty. The time is favorable, a time of strength within, clarity and culture without. Clarity and culture without. That sounds just like Taurus. Power is expressing itself in a graceful and controlled way. This brings extreme success and wealth. Here's the image of the hexagram. You have fire in heaven above. That's the trigram above. The image of possession in great measure. Thus the superior man curbs evil and furthers good, and thereby obeys the benevolent will of heaven. The sun in heaven above, shedding light over everything on earth, is the image of possession on a grand scale. Where is Taurus in all this? Possession. Possession is Taurus. And it just so happens that, around, late in the week, so starting Thursday and Friday, Moon is going to be transiting tropical Taurus. But as we move along, there's going to be this little snippet where we're getting an influence of Taurus, and you're going to have the solution of Taurus. Solution is always in the sidereal zodiac because we want to get in alignment with the stars. The outside is the sidereal, is where the constellations are. So if you go out in the night sky, and on Saturday, you're going to see Moon starting to enter the constellation of Taurus. The other things of note here is that I love these times where you get this little overlap, where you get the influence of one sign, and then the solution is the same constellation. And this shows traditionally, whenever we do this in a CIRF report, it shows great strength of the solution because it's very congruent. And if you look at the second house, which is possession and material goods, that's ruled by Taurus. So, and the reason why I bring up the second house is because this is the possession in great measure. That's the house of the astrological house that's equivalent to hexagram 14 is the second house. And the second house is ruled by Taurus. It's all connected, and I find that incredible. So going back to around Saturday, you're going to start to see Moon going into the constellation of Taurus. And so that's the right action. And it's not necessarily getting out of relationships. It's getting out of the continuum of having, I messed that up. It's getting out of the continuum of relationships. So even if you're like making yourself away from relationships, that's still in the continuum of relationships. You're trying to be by yourself. So it really, Taurus is about experiencing and being grounded in experience. And so if there's relationship around you, it's about experiencing that to the fullest at that time. If there is no relationship there and you find yourself alone, it's the Taurus energy is about experiencing that as well. So not needing a relationship to curb your loneliness or whatever. It's about experiencing that right then and there. It's like not the best move here is, according to all these things together, is to not be connected to the relationship continuum. It's not to avoid relationships. It's not to get alone. It's not also to be with someone else either. It's just being outside of that whole continuum. If you're with someone, fine, experience it. If you're alone, fine, experience it. Don't be a part of the complaining where you are in terms of relationships altogether. Okay. All right. And I want to make sure that you know that it's not about avoiding relationships. This is going to be the social media slide on National Dream Center on Monday. By the way, if you like the idea of having these updates, which hopefully will remind you of what to do, then go to National Dream Center, Facebook and Instagram, and you'll get these slides periodically. We're going to be craving relationship or craving away from relationship. That's not the way to go. Emotional obscurity keeps the collective in relational disharmony and inner conflict. So what is the solution? It's to go to Taurus and be grounded and be, in this case, a tree hugger. You don't have to go hug trees to get your groundedness. It's about experiencing the material world, but with good intentions inside. That's according to the I-Ching 14. Ground yourself from emotional conundrums. Power is achieved only through clean intentions and good being whatever is good to you, your highest values, your most positive future is being focused on those and going and carrying it out. Avoid jealousness, laziness, stubbornness, materialism. What does that sound like? Those sound like the downside to Taurus. Because let's face it, the solution here, above all, is to get in alignment with Taurus. And you're not going to be too far away from that, because you've got a great period of time from, well, let's see here, from Thursday all the way to even past the next CIRF report is going to be either the influence or solution or both of Taurus. So you got the majority of the days in that Taurus energy, and it looks positive according to the I-Ching to do that even when the moon is not in Taurus, because it's still that relationship confusion. And so getting out of that, getting grounded, is going to be very positive for you. All right. You let me know if you like this. We're going to go through this new week, and I'm going to give you updates. You know, the DreamBot, the collective unconscious, the memes in the dreams are going to change. So I'll update those. We'll look at the astrology. I'll continue to do I-Ching readings, but we already have the week at a glance. And this overall context is the influence is the relationship continuum, the need for relationship or the need to get out of relationship. That's kind of the influence. And it just feels sticky and it feels fuzzy, unclear. It's not trustworthy because of that Neptune square, especially tonight and tomorrow and early part of this week. And the solution is going to be more grounded Taurus energy and clearing up your intentions inside. All right, that's it. All right, we'll see you on, worst case, it'll be Tuesday, but it might be as early as tomorrow. The interim readings will be much shorter, hopefully, and not so lengthy. That's another reason why we're trying to do this week thing. We'll get the lengthy one out, and then you can always just refer to that for the astrology, and then we'll just do periodic updates if the energy has changed, and they'll be much shorter updates. All right, how's that sound? Put your comments below, and thank you for all your share and subscribe and likes. Thank you, and we'll see you sometime this week, hopefully Tuesday night. Thanks.